Sega Saturn, Sega Saturn, Sega
Oh my god, that's brilliant. Oh man, that's great. Alright, so here's a pleasant surprise. So, when I was picking out games I was going to be playing for this retrospect, I was mostly going through word of mouth, what games I hear are highly revered on the Sega Saturn. And one game that kept popping up was a little game called Dragon Force. So, what this supposedly is a RTS game, which I said to myself, that had to be awful, because console RTS games typically don't work out too well, because you are essentially trying to play a game that requires this with this, which doesn't really work all that well. So I had my reservations as to whether or not Dragon Force would be any good, but I was pleasantly surprised. Not only is this one of the better games I played this month, but it's also one of the most brilliant pieces of game design I've ever seen. So the plot is nothing to write home about. A kingdom, a continent with various kingdoms end up going to war over a ancient force that they want to take control of in order to better rule the kingdom. And like, if you've played any game like Fire Emblem, Shining Force, or something like that, you know what to expect here. There's nothing special about it in the slightest, but the game, at the very least, does have some really good character. The individual generals that you can play as are really cool. All the different units show a lot of personality. It's not bad at all, it's just nothing special. The graphics in this game are really cool, though. The main thing that impressed me about the game are the battle segments, where it typically sees a general and two generals face off with one another, and they are usually aided by a large army of controllable players. And the amount of them that can be on screen at once is absolutely stellar, especially with this kind of detail too. Like, this is the kind of thing I would expect to see in like an independent game that's trying to go for that 8-bit aesthetic, but this actually looks the parts. Like, you always hear about how the Sega Saturn was a 2D powerhouse, and I can't think of any game other that shows that off more than this game. As for the gameplay, it is a weird beast. It is a RTS, a real-time strategy game, but it's also been smartly simplified. So how the game basically works is you pick a general, and you have a map screen where various things are going on, and you have a certain amount of time to dictate where you're going to send your generals and your troops. You send them to a certain location, and then they go head-to-head with each other with a group of, I guess you want to call them NPCs, because you aren't exactly generally controlling them, but you are commanding how they attack, how they defend, their formations, stuff like that. And like you would in an RTS game, but you also control them in a similar fashion to an RPG, and that also goes for how you manage your armies too. Certain generals will be better with certain troops. You get to pick and choose which generals you give more power to. Like, there's a lot to consider here, and that's the brilliance of Dragon Force. By simplifying the RTS elements of the game, they not only make it playable for a console game, but they compensate for the loss in complexity with that of an RPG. So it actually ends up working a lot better than any other RTS on a console I can think of. I had much more fun playing this than I did Brutal Legend, Halo Wars, or any of the console RTS that were on the N64 at the time. So yeah, Dragon Force, pleasant surprise. This is a really good game, and I'm surprised more console RTS games don't take influence from it. There would be a sequel to Dragon Force with Dragon Force 2, but it would never land stateside. But I do believe there is a fan patch for it, so if you want to play the game, you can always get a fan's translation for your modified console or just play it on an emulator. And Dragon Force would later be re-released on the PS2 as a Sega Classic, so yeah, this game actually has developed a pretty large cult following, and anytime I see someone talking about the best games on the Sega Saturn, this is usually one that's brought up in conversation, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. This game is absolutely fantastic. One of the best games I played this summer, right? Best games I played for this retrospective, right up there with Panzer Dragoon. But anyway, that's going to do it for Dragon Force, guys. Be sure to join me tomorrow as we cover the next game on the list.